Hola, cage fighting connoisseurs. This is KidNate at BloodyElbow.com. Brought in once more to rein things in and keep the show on time. Train's running. Dallas Winston, sad and sorry. Zane Simon, that effing idiot. These guys, they're on probation. They're not going to talk too much about this fight card. They're going to talk just right about this fight card. UFC Fight Night Macau, Bisping versus Lee. It's hot. It's happening. 6 a.m., 2 a.m., something like that, Saturday morning American time. Who's not going to be up all night watching this magic? And I'm not even going to ask our panel who's going to be up all night watching this live, because thanks to the miracle of UFC Fight Pass, you can watch it when you get up. All right, Dallas.
No. That question warrants interest, because you're going to have to compensate someone handsomely in order to get up and do play-by-play for that show.
Brent Brookhouse has already got that covered. SBNation.com is going to... We're going to be sharing resources. MMA Mania and Bloody Elbow are going to be pooling our reporters, our journalistic might, and covering this one in Tulsa jointly. So your blackmail threat was for naught, Dallas.
No, that's fine, because the positive of that was me vying for handsome compensation, and we all know that that's not going to go well for me. So
I mean, there's the implausible and then the impossible. Yeah, Zane Simon knows everything about every fight on this card. He was just telling us how many hours of research he's done, poring over, I believe, some scrolls from the Shaolin Temple for some of these guys. Might be unveiling the Dim Mak Death Touch.
Yeah, that's totally happening. I think I watched about 15 minutes of footage on Yao Jikui, because I had no clue who that guy was. I mean, I knew he fought on Tough China, but I hadn't seen anything of him.
We've spared no expense, gone to every length, and we've got exhausting prep for this fight card. So even if we seem to rush through some of these fights, it's not because it's like the iceberg. There's a huge hidden iceberg of secret knowledge we're not going to be sharing with you. But let's
huge. Y-U-G-E.
Yeah.
Come on, Nate. Keep the show under 2 hours this time, please.
I'm going, cats. We've got 7 fights on the Fight Pass prelims, not to be confused with the Fight Pass main card, which is 4 fights. First up, bantamweights Yao Zikai and Royston Wee. Dallas, you can go first.
All right, so Yao Zikui is 1-1. So first of all, that's kind of weird. You know, we talked about UFC being the whatever of martial arts, Super Bowl. So it's kind of odd to be 1-1. I realized he was a tougher. The guy he lost to did not have a good record, and I think the guy he beat was listed as 0-1, which meant he was 0-0 by the time that this cat got the win over him. So there's a couple guys on here that, I mean, it's bad to do SureDog research, but if you go the extra mile and be a top-level journalist and look at some of their opposition, that's pretty rough looking. So Royston Wee's okay, though. I mean, I think this is a bit of a setup fight for him. So, yeah, that's going to be my pick here.
That's your pick. Picking Royston Wee. And Zane?
Well, I will say this. One thing worth knowing is that it's not really worth putting any time or any emphasis on these guys' records in terms of, like, you know, UFC has Yao Zikui listed at 1-2 even, so we don't know what these guys' records are. They could have each fought 20 times.
Draws all their stats, whether it's height, reach, record, out of a hat, I believe.
Well, I trust them on the China records, because at least a little more, because I think they actually talk to the fighters. SureDog just goes off what they know is reported. And for these guys, they could have easily had 10 or 15 fights that nobody knows about. So,
just like Rickson Gracie and his 499 record. You've got to go to the fighters and put there.
I wouldn't look at these guys and say, oh, he's 1-1. That's mean. That doesn't mean anything here.
Really? The truth is, I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but doesn't it? Like, does he really have a large conglomeration of fights that are?
Well, the point is, we have no idea.
It does hint that he might be a tad inexperienced. Can we agree on that?
It hints that he's probably well, no matter what, if he's fighting in mainland China, he's inexperienced. Like, he could have 50 fights and he would still be inexperienced. Like,
so the discrepancy is 1-1 or 1-2?
Well, that's the UFC discrepancy, but I'm saying that, like, we don't know. We don't know how many.
We're not hair splitting. This is an important debate to get out of the way. And also, I should bring up, there have been many UFC fighters who've done the Ultimate Fighter show started out at 0-0 and gone on to have fairly storied careers. The only guy I'm thinking of right now is Corey Hill, who did not go on to have a storied career.
There's Matt Mitrione.
Matt Mitrione. Matt Riddle.
Yep.
Jesse Taylor?
No.
No. He washed out.
There are a few. But anyway, the point I would make here is that Royston Wee and Yao Kui, to my eyes, are equally bad, and whoever wins this shit show will not be any better for it. They both wrestle a lot. They don't have a whole lot other than a grinding top control game. I haven't seen anything out of them that should make anybody excited.
Let's see. And the odds makers, what odds makers there are, we're looking at bestfightodds.com. They've got Royston Wee at -265 or -253. Yao Kai is the underdog +185 or +197. And that brings us to Elizabeth Phillips and Milana Dudeva. And is this a women's bantamweight fight? Yes, it is. Yep. All right, Zane, you can go first on this one.
All right, I'm actually pretty interested in seeing Dudeva fight. I'm not sure if she's out of the Caucasus. I'm not sure if she's actually Dagestani or not. But
she's Russian.
Is she just Russian?
I don't know. That's what it said. Russian.
Well, yeah, but okay. Anyway, that valuable insight aside, but she's. I mean,
if you were in person, I think Dallas would smack you for that, Zane. That was.
Yeah, well.
I'd have to say, well, that was okay. Kids, no more hitting.
Russian.
Yeah.
She's Russian to the extent that you would call somebody from Dagestan Russian.
I didn't even know Czechoslovakia didn't exist until someone on YouTube yelled at me for it a couple months ago.
Yeah, okay. They broke up a ways back, and that's a totally different region of the world.
Yes, I'm aware it's not the same place. I'm using an example for my geographical prowess.
I see. Well, I wasn't even going to mention that Zane mispronounced Caucasus, but he did. So anyway, go ahead. Back to the fight.
Okay. Anyway, we're getting into this really. This show is.
This is how pumped we are for this card. We are all going to be up. I won't even need the alarm clock because I'll be like, how will I sleep waiting for this card? Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, anyway, Dudeva, she has that Eastern European kind of Russian striking style. It's very counter-heavy. It has a big lack of emphasis on jabs and straight punches, but she throws really good, tight, technical hooks. She's a bit one-sided. She throws all of her power comes off her right side, both in her legs and her hands, and she can be a bit predictable that way, but I was pretty unimpressed with Elizabeth Phillips for her debut. It was a short notice debut, so she could certainly be better than that, but she comes out of, what's the Spokane-based camp where...
You're on your own on that one.
Oh, Sikjitsu. She's a Sikjitsu fighter, and their striking is notably bad.
Who else is out of that camp, Zane?
That's Chiesa, Sam Cecilia, Juliana Lima. They are all pretty terrible range strikers. Cecilia's been decent in the clinch in like dirty boxing, but his range striking has been really stagnant. And so I would pick Dudeva to pretty much. I don't know if she'll knock her out, but because that's pretty rare in women's MMA. But she should probably have all the control she needs for a 3-round fight.
And Dallas, your pick?
It's weird that this is buried on the bottom because this is really not only one of the better, but probably one of the more relevant fights on the entire card, besides some of the on the main. Dudieva's, pretty. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name right, but she's pretty legit. She also, I believe, is a sambist and has a judo background, so she's pretty well-rounded. She throws pretty good. It's not super polished on the feet, but solid stand-up, we'll say, and the ability to both clinch and just, maul with punches from there, or, hit the takedown. I'm kind of interested to see what Phillips does because, as Zane said, she was short notice last time, and it wasn't the prettiest fight, but I thought both ladies showed a lot of heart in that one. And didn't she smash Letourneau's eyeball, retina, cornea? I mean, orbital, all those things. So I'm kind of in. This should actually be a pretty good scrap, but I think Dudieva should take this one.
All right, and the odds makers agree they've got Dudiev a favor, but not by a huge margin, minus 169 up to minus 165. And Phillips, who I nominate, she should have the nickname Elizabeth Bathory Phillips, but that's just me being a metalhead, plus 135, plus 141. All right, and that brings us to Colby Covington against Wang and Ying, welterweight fight. What is young Colby doing? Is he from Macau? Is he from the Hong Kong region? Or has he been imported all this way to face Wang and Ying? Dallas?
He has been imported. He's a 5-0 guy out of ATT. So that on the surface sounds, fairly legit. ATT's probably, I want to say, whatever, long-standing one of the best camps in MMA forever. But if you look at his record, the last cat he beat, Jay Ellis, was 12-57. How do you exist in MMA with a 12-57 record?
Which promotion did this fight take place in? Was it on an Indian reservation in California, perchance?
I can't help you with that much. You're the one that's got 7 computers.
I can check. I've
only got 2 computers, and one's pretty busy with the prawn, okay? So
I forget his next guy's name, but his next opponent was pretty legit. He was 8-5. But then his guys after that are 3-2, 1-2, and 6-29. So, and I have to point out here, for a guy with 5 fights in MMA, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's actually probably pretty normal. But if that's where maybe I'm being too harsh. When you go to the UFC, I guess. So this is, I don't know how to term it. This is a regional fighter who really hasn't beat anybody or made enough waves to warrant your typical UFC shot. So there's a lot of kind of like anomalies there. You have to look at this card much differently. And it's cool, the UFC is trying to break into China, big market and all that, I understand. But so it's different, though. You got a lot of super inexperienced guys, and for the purpose of this conversation, it makes it kind of hard to really form up in a sensible analysis. So I did watch Wang and Ying in his last fight. I don't know. He didn't look too bad. He was a scrapper. Seemed to have not a huge striker, but a pretty decent scrambler. I guess I'm going to probably go with him on this more because I'm guessing that the UFC is kind of setting up a lot of the Chinese fighters with not easy fights, but winnable fights.
One would think. And Zane, your thoughts?
Well, this is a pretty standard wrestler-striker matchup, and yeah, it's definitely hyper-regional. Covington was a Pac-10 champ.
Was he really?
Yep.
That I didn't know.
I have article Pac-10 wrestling champ Colby Covington cited for 4th-degree assault in front of me. So.
Charming. He might have big things ahead of him in MMA.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
In my bad, I forget. Ang Ying has won both of his fights by TKO. So.
Yeah, he's actually a pretty decent kickboxer. He's not well-rounded at all. Doesn't have a wealth of secondary skills, but he throws accurately on his feet and is aggressive. So that's nice to see. I mean, there's something to build off there. Covington, yeah, he trains with Masvidal. He was John Jones' roommate in college. That's also worth knowing.
There's some scoops about pillow fights that we haven't broken yet on Bloody Hell, but we're holding that back and could unleash it at any time.
Yeah, but Covington, yeah, he's a quality prospect early in his MMA career. I mean, he's fighting the kind of guys that you fight when you're, in your first 5 fights, mostly cans. Nothing wrong with that. And Anying Wang, I think Covington's probably gonna roll over him in a pretty ugly fight. I mean, it looks like this has all the all the stall, sort of lay and pray written all over it. You got a kickboxer who can't kickbox and a wrestler who can't do anything else.
Set those alarms for 2 in the morning, kids, and get up and do not miss this action. I believe that's what you meant to say. And the odds makers, they like some Colby Covington too. They've got him favored minus 278 up to minus 290. Wang and Ying, despite Dallas's remarkable optimism, is favored underdog plus 210 to plus 222. And that brings us to the one fight on the undercard I'm actually interested in: Roland Delorme versus Yuta Sasaki. I'm hearing some buzz out of the land of rising sun that Sasaki is a prospect. Dallas, you want to talk about this first?
Yeah, I got my Wangs mixed up, which is common. Everyone does that, but I was confusing Wang and Ying with Wang Sai. So yeah, Zane is correct. He's the striker. He beat he fought in the UFC already, right?
Yep.
Won by TKO. He's won by both.
Yep.
So these things happen in MMA, kids. Yeah, Yuta Sasaki is a really, really legit prospect. 17-1 Shudo Pacific Rim champ. I don't have it in front of me, but I want to say he's got a hefty win streak, 10, 11, 12, 12 wins in a row. I kind of love him for this because he was inspired by Takanori Gomi, Fireball Kid. And he has, I asked Mike Reardon, our wrestling specialist, about this, but he has some experience over in Japan, both combat wrestling like Gomi did and some Greco-Roman experience. Super, super legit. Normally, Roland Delorme is a pretty tough guy. I mean, he has foreseeable limits. Normally, against a guy you haven't heard of, he'd be a safe pick, but I think Sasaki will not only win, but he may be a legit prospect for the future here.
And Zane?
This is one of those fights where, like, I did this against in Roland Delorme's last fight too, against Michinori Tanaka, where I picked Delorme as the safer, more tested fighter that I knew what he would show up with. But the truth is that fight against Tanaka was just pretty bad. Like, Delorme came out and looked all right early, but he seems so predictable and so one-dimensional that I'm kind of wondering if he's now just like, people have seen him enough in the UFC that they're having a pretty easy time game planning for him. And so with somebody who is a pretty bright prospect like Sasaki, who has shown a lot of finishing ability, maybe hasn't fought all the best competition, but is winning consistently, I can't really pick Delorme anymore at this point. I just, it feels like he's a tough dude, but he can't strike worth a lick. And if he's not going to instantly out-grapple somebody, I don't know that he's going to win fights.
I tuned out for a second. Did you just say take out a mortgage on your house and bet every dime on Sasaki? Because that's what I might do. I might do that just now.
Take out a mortgage on your house, bet every dime on Sasaki, and really, this should be your betting card of the year. There is real money to be made here, top value.
There are some darts to be thrown here for sure. Sasaki's a slight favorite though, so if you want to get on the hype train, he's only minus 124 or minus 130, but Delorme's only minus 110 or minus 104. So methinks the odds makers are not as hip to the hype around Sasaki as maybe some of our more diligent fans. All right, now brings us to Danny Mitchell and Wang Sai. This is the correct Wang that Dallas inadvertently got wanged up earlier, and these guys are welterweights.
Alberto Mina, Shinso Anzai. Is that?
Well, the odds, because I was looking at best fight odds and not Wikipedia, but we'll get to the other one. But
Best fight odds didn't even have odds up this morning when I checked.
And now they do. They're moving fast, Dallas. You got to keep up. All right. So are we having a mutiny? Must we talk about welterweights Alberto Mina and Shinsho Anzai first? Is that what you're insisting?
Oh, I don't know.
They've drawn a line in the sand, ladies and gentlemen. There's nothing I can do. Zane Simon, tell us about Alberto Mina and Shinsho Anzai.
All right. Alberto Mina was kind of, he was a prospect that I think had a little interest when he got signed in the UFC last year. After a win over Glenn Sparv. He got signed early this year, late last year. And his fight got canceled. He was supposed to make his debut against Zach Cummings, but Cummings missed weight, and Mina was taken off the card. He's undefeated at 10-0, fighting in the Southeast Asian scene. He's shown himself to be a pretty good, like, Muay Thai submission artist kind of combination. And I honestly know nothing about Shinso Anzai. I have no insight there. I can't tell you anything about him. I know that he's coming out of Pancrase, and
so you do know something. See, I knew you were lying when you said nothing.
To me, that's not enough. To know he's coming out of Pancrase. He's 8-1.
He just beat Ryo Kawamura.
Yeah, and he has a win over Ryo Kawamura, which is a quality win. And he could be good. I don't know what his game looks like at all. I have to assume that Alberto Mina is the reasonable favorite here, just because he came in, he's shown some technical skill, he's shown some finishing ability, he's shown himself to be a reasonably decent prospect on the regional scene. And then Zai seems like a guy who's been picked up late just because he's in the area and has a pretty good winning streak, and unlike a lot of Japanese prospects, doesn't have a whole bunch of draws to his record. So,
Dallas, your take on this masterpiece?
Actually, Mina's a pretty legit entry. I mean, not gonna like set the world on fire, but like Zane said, he raised a few eyebrows when he was signed, 10-0. Big finisher. I think he's got eight first round finishes, and he's a BJJ and a judo black belt and a pretty competent striker as well. So he's definitely a worthwhile UFC debutant here. I think and I want to say, didn't they take Anzai on short notice because Mina's got rescheduled to fight Sheldon Westcott?
Yep.
So I think they're taking Anzai just because, I mean, he just beat Ryo Kawamura, who's been around forever. For that scene, that's probably a quality win. I don't even know what his record is, but it's got to be up in the 60s and 70s for total fights by now. That might be an exaggeration, but he's finished all his wins. So I think this is going to be a wild, explosive firecracker that Mina is going to win.
Bold words. And the odds makers agree. They've got Mina favored -179 and -185, and Anzai is the underdog, 145 to +151. And now we're at Danny Mitchell and the wrong Wang, aka Wang Sai, or was he the right Wang? Dallas, put your hand on it and let us know.
It's already been there. That's how I concentrate. Don't be gross.
Talk. Fights.
That was your hi,
That
Dallas.
was
Let us
my
know.
That's as much
seamless.
introduction as you're
I
going to
should-
get today, Dallas.
I should have translated all your penis slang into, hey, give us your thoughts. And
Man,
also
when you
fun.
walk into a Wang joke like that, man, I'm gonna be riding it.
Dude, I
Oh,
started
that
the
was
Wang
dumb.
joke. It's not like you're picking up on some, secret. All right. I think
Wang means pee-pee, guys. That's the secret. It kills me.
God, is that what's?
Go
Actually, I
ahead.
think
Talk, fight.
this is a good. Danny Mitchell's pretty legit. Cheesecake Assassin, one of the better nicknames in MMA. He's fought some pretty solid guys. He lost to Gunnar Nelson and Kendall Grove, but he did beat, I don't know, it's Dean Amasinger, who's an old. I think he might have had a couple fights outside of Tough, but he did submit Nico Masoki too. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and I want to say in like Kempo or Taekwondo too. Not much of a striker, but I forget who was the cat he drew, and Igor Aruja.
Araja, yeah.
Who's a BJJ specialist. So that was a tough matchup because it kind of, and that was a decent fight. A lot of scrambles back and forth, but I think that kind of negated Danny Mitchell's strength. Tough to get a beat on the either right or wrong Wang, depending on your view on this controversial hotbed of discussion and whatever. But he had a real back and forth. Wasn't that not in the finals for Tough
Yep.
China? Lost a split. That was a weird fight, really back and forth. I want to say one dude won the first round clearly, one won the second clearly. A lot of back takes, transitions. I'm gonna have to go with Mitchell here. I mean, way more experienced. How many fights does Wang Sai have overall?
He's listed at 12, but like I say, that's not really, with the China guys, you can't really go off.
So I'll go with Danny Mitchell, both by skill set, past experience.
And Zane?
Well, yeah, I think it has to be said straight off that it's going to be tough to pick any of these Chinese fighters over anyone until they've shown that they can beat some guys. Like, you can't pick really Wang On-Ying over Colby Covington, or Wang Sai over Danny Mitchell, or Zhang Lipeng over Brendan O'Reilly, or like until these guys actually show that they can really compete well at even a regional level, I can't pick them to win any of these fights.
I think their best chance would be go back in an MMA time machine to about 1992 before the Ultimate Fighting Championship is revealed.
That said, if they were to go back in that time machine, Danny Mitchell is kind of the guy they're going to find. So that's... I mean, saying his fight with Igor Araujo was decent dismisses the fact that it had one of the best worst UFC moments of like the past decade, in which Araujo and Mitchell ended the fight in like a 50-50 guard, just going like baby hammer fists at each other for like a minute straight. And it was one of the worst showings of bad technique. I mean, it's the sort of thing that I gotta imagine Joe Silva wakes up seeing that in his nightmares.
Were they hammer fisting one another on the thighs, or whereabouts were
Just
these?
like in the chest, like little baby slap fight, worst possible thing imaginable.
Well,
It
now I'm
was
gonna have to unearth that fight and give it another watch. I think I probably.
God, I'll send you guys the GIF of it because it's just one of those things
That sounds
it's
like it'll be
terrible.
adequate. So are you two
And
picking Danny
but
Mitchell?
Danny Mitchell is an exciting he does well with his submission game. He's the kind of guy who's going to throw a flying triangle or a flying heel hook at somebody at random and you know try and do some silly shit with his submission game. And Wang Sai, he's actually probably uh got the best chance to be a decent fighter out of any of the welterweights on that Tough China show. He showed himself that he can scramble well and he can strike all right, and I certainly thought he beat Zhang Lipeng or Zhong Lipeng, but I can't necessarily pick him to beat anyone with any mediocre amount of experience. So.
All right, and the odds makers agree they've got Mitchell favored -253 to -265, and Wang Sai, despite being the right Wang for Dallas Winston, is the underdog +185 to +197. And I am your puerile pundit, and we are now moving on to the four-fight main card, starting with featherweights Ning Guangyao versus Yang Jianping. And now this is the featherweight finale from the Tough China series that was delayed because of injury.
Yep.
Okay, and anybody remember who or what or why this was delayed? Who was injured?
I think both fighters may have been. I think it was one of those things. I mean, like, one of them, I want to say it was Jianping Yang, actually fought 2 months ago at a regional China show. So they've been, letting these guys stay busy even in the interim.
Interesting. So go ahead and talk about the fight. Who's going to win?
I have no idea. I don't know who these guys are. I haven't even watched. I cannot remember. I just watched. I think it was Guang Yuning or beat Yao Zikui maybe, but I don't even remember if it was him or Jianping Yang. I honestly cannot tell you anything about these two or who's going to win this fight.
You shamed your family.
I know. I'm fine. You know what? I can handle this shame. I'm not. I don't know.
You're not ashamed of this shame. Well, Dallas, are you ashamed of this shame?
Well, what's weird is that you cannot find any of these fight videos. Like, at the very least, considering all that we're bitching about, it would be nice if we could at least go on the internet and watch some of their fights from Tough China. But even that was like a task. I got to page 3 of Google and said, fuck it. But actually, I'm kind of leaning Jianping Yang here.
Which is funny because Tough China got widely bootlegged. Like, as soon as the Chinese production staff got their hands on the video, it was all over YouTube for about a day and a half.
You know, there was one clip from Yang on YouTube, and it looked like it was from Tough China, and it was pretty badass. It was kind of a compilation of, I think, one fight, but sidekick, and then he heaved the guy was kind of turtled, kind of like a little suplex, and then he finished him by armbar. And I do know that he has, I believe, he reminds me of, doesn't remind me, he's got a Sanda background, kind of like Kung Lee. So good striker, gamer, can also change levels and shoot. So I'm kind of leaning his way, but Ning Guangyao is a southpaw, and to me, I think there's one of his fights from Rough China on YouTube, and he looks like a big-ass welterweight. I mean, like a Gleison Tebow type. Could have been that the other guy he was fighting was smaller. But and he looks to have pretty decent wrestling too, but I think the combination of the striking from Jianping Yang is going to kind of be the difference here. For all I know, he might be able to out-wrestle him and out-strike him, but he's going to have a few more dimensions to throw his way, so I'm leaning in that direction.
All right, and the odds makers, they like themselves some Yang Xiangping. They've got him favored from -221 up to -230. Ning Guangyao is the underdog, +170 to 179, and that brings us to lightweights. Zhang Liping versus Brendan O'Reilly, and Zhang Liping was the lightweight tough winner, correct?
Zhang Liping was the welterweight tough winner,
And now he's moving
Jobs.
down to
and
lightweight.
the other two guys were featherweights in that last bout, not welterweights.
Yes, that was Dallas's mistake, not mine, for the record.
Yeah.
And also Gleason T-Val's a lightweight. See, I do know some MMA trivia. That's irrelevant. Go on, talk about the fights, Zane.
Okay, so Brendan O'Reilly was on one of the other seasons of Tough, so we're getting kind of a tough pickup versus tough pickup here. Trying to remember if he was on Smashes or on Nations. I think it might have been Smashes. And he, this is, I don't know, like he's a decent young prospect. He's won a few fights. He's mostly kind of a submission-y Australian guy. And honestly, I don't know. This is
He's kind of submission-y. He's Australian, a little bit submission-y.
He's Australian, so he can't wrestle, and he's fighting a guy
What a racist generalization.
Yep, insult an entire continent.
Yeah, well, if you can tell me a great Australian wrestler in MMA right now, I'll be happy to hear it.
Crocodile Hunter, double leg Crocs.
He's
No?
dead.
Steve, let's
All right,
not.
now you've over the
now-
line. It's a league game, Smokey. It's too much.
Okay. Anyway, Zhang Liping, he's kind of a grinding wrestle submission guy, but he's not very good at holding position. He likes to bully opponents, but he doesn't have any of the technique to effectively bully them. Tends to get a little overwhelmed when he can't bully them. I mean, it's probably a pretty even fight once again until I see something out of these tough China guys against competition outside of China. I'm just not picking them to win any of these fights. So.
You heard it here first. A flagrant admission of open racism right here on MMA Nation. We all hang our heads in shame. But Zane's probably got something to it, actually, because the Chinese talent pool, it really is like an MMA time machine way back. All right, and Dallas, your pick?
Well, I did. So Brendan O'Reilly's 5-0. I didn't know he was on the Ultimate Fighter, so props to Zane for that catch. But I did go the extra mile, and here's his opponent's record for that 5-0: 1-6, 2-3, 5-6, 0-1, 0-1.
So they brought along a lot of experience into the cage, is what you're saying.
Actually, one of the 2 and 3 guys, Sam, I don't know how to say his last name, Gascoigne. He almost finished him right out of the gate. Came out, clobbered him with a couple punches, kind of dropped him, went to flurry, and the other guy went. Actually, I didn't know he was Australian either, and I believe he turned that fight around with a lot of fairly boring top control, or he took him down and stabilized from that point. So, kind of like Zane said, though, I don't know if that makes a big difference because we don't know a lot about Zhang Liping other than what we saw in that controversial split decision with Wang Sai, who is the right Wang. I would probably lean with Zhang in this one, but it's kind of a toss-up. I don't even know. I felt kind of smart because I went on SureDog and looked that up, but I'm coming to the same conclusion as Zane. I don't know how anyone can form a competent analysis or pick on this fight in particular.
That's what makes this card so exciting. Nobody knows what's going to happen. We're going to have to wake up at the early hours to find out. So, the odds makers, they like themselves some Brendan O'Reilly -190 all the way across the board. Zhang Liping at +150. That tells me they set the odds and nobody has taken a bet on that fight, is what that tells
but then again, I said the same thing about maybe Colby Covington, but then Zane busted up that he was a Pac-10 champ, which totally would change, so maybe this guy, there's something
Maybe there's
else
some
there.
secret facts out there we just don't know.
My point is we're kind of stupid, so we're just more talking about the card and the difficulties of picking it rather than, Don't listen to us, anyone.
That's one of our favorite sub-themes. MMA blogging is hards, kids. It's hards.
I think it's more worthwhile to note that if you really did a lot of hard fact-finding, studying up on this card, then you really need to re-examine your life. I mean, I spend a shitload of time on MMA, way more than I should, but even I have standards.
And
Come
you
on.
get paid for some of this. I mean, occasionally.
Yeah.
You know, a big lighter or some pens or something. But
that's right. Occasionally, you ruffle through your couch cushions, and then
that school supply packet arrives at your house, and you're just so excited.
Exactly. But everybody needs to have standards, and our standards should be this card. I mean,
this is where we draw the line, huh?
Yeah.
Except for the 2 fights that we have left to talk about.
Yes.
Well, okay.
And
sure.
These are actually hot. Welterweights Don Hyung Stun Gun Kim against Tyrone Woodley. Both of these guys have had some ups and downs, and this might be a pivotal fight because I think the winner of this leaps back into serious contention talk, or at least top 10 talk, top 5 talk. The loser of this may be heading for the Lost Battalion. Who wants to talk about this card first?
Well, I'll just go real quick. It's kind of weird because, I mean, I don't know how you could paint Woodley's performance against McDonald as anything other than really, really disappointing. It was almost like he shelled up and kind of acquiesced in the 3rd round that he was not going to win. And then, you know, Stun Gun has kind of been pretty stable, but am I wrong? Wasn't Hathaway giving him the business before he pulled out that spinning back fist in his last fight?
But so was Eric Silva in the fight before that.
Was that what it was? No, what happened in the Hathaway fight?
The Hathaway fight was pretty back and forth. They were cracking each other a lot. Hathaway showed more technical pressure consistently, but every time he would start to build any momentum, Kim would just go on some like wild blitz and put Hathaway on his heels.
Right. So Silva was the spinning back fist knockout, and then against Hathaway, Kim hardly did any clinch.
Hathaway was a spinning back elbow. Silva was a flurry, I think, start with an uppercut.
But he was losing the Silva fight, correct?
Silva was losing the fight. He had his eyes closed. He just put his head down and threw a big hook, and it caught Silva flush and put him out.
Hail Mary, I pray for loss of consciousness for my opponent.
Sadly, he seems to think that's his new direction as a fighter.
That's what I was going to say. Against Hathaway, didn't he go away from his strengths and was content to sit there and strike rather than try to get inside and clinch with him?
I smell locker room bonus is what I smell. That somehow Lorenzo and Dana signaled to Stun Gun that, dude, this is what we want to see. We want to see mayhem, wild, crazy, anarchy.
What they may have signaled to him is that if he wins another fight like he did against C.R. Bahadurzada and Paulo Tiago, he is 1 loss at any time away from getting cut.
Yeah, that's also a good point. You might want to talk to Yushin Okami or John Fitch about your future if you keep winning fights like this.
Yeah.
So the little bit of analysis I have here is I do think that Kim is a much better scrambler and, you know, in transitions, much better chance of taking the back, threatening with submissions.
I think he's a better MMA wrestler.
That's hard. I don't think he's going to win a straight wrestling match against Woodley.
I don't think he would win a straight wrestling match, but I think he has a better chance of putting Woodley down in an MMA fight because he phase shifts and he mixes up judo and wrestling. He's got a nice double leg, and I don't know. I think both of these guys are head cases, though. Huh?
I'll give you the mixed judo and wrestling. I don't know if he's a real talented. He's not a bad phase shifter. His entries have not. I don't know.
He's got some phase shifting. Woodley to me is a very like one thought at a time kind of fighter. He's either striking or he's clinching or he's going for a takedown, and it's very difficult for him to shift gears. I mean, like something like I watched the Jake Shields fight again recently in a real fit of masochism. And
what the fuck is wrong with you? Out of all the bad things,
I wanted to see it because I think Woodley is a head case a little bit, and I think Stun Gun is becoming a head case, but in radically different directions. Woodley just runs really hot and cold, and he's had these fights where he's looked like a stone killer, and I thought, oh, he's over his problems. He's not going to be freezing anymore. He's not going to get on one game plan and just stick with it whether it works or not. And then he has the Roy McDonald fight, and it was like a complete regression to the form he showed against Jake Shields. He can get sucked into a terrible fight and can't get out.
Yeah.
I would agree with all that, and I think this is pretty pivotal for both of them because Kim's been in the mix for a while, and I think people are ready for, for him to veer in one direction or the other, like become, a legit threat. Because I want to say, even though, like, as he's come up, he had a couple real lackluster, boring fights, and then Silva was dotting him up, and he came back and won that one. So it's kind of been, even though he's put some wins together, it hasn't been super, super convincing. And really the same with Woodley, although I'd say it's been against higher competition. But yeah, really back and forth. Really two poor performances with Shields and McDonald. But then I was super impressed. The way he looked against Carlos Condit was, I mean, if you that kind of Woodley, I think will win this fight, because then I would only go that Kim has the transition and scramble advantage, and that's legit. He could catch him with something if Woodley has to revert to his wrestling. I'm kind of interested. Actually, it sounds weird, but I think Woodley is a bit of the safer pick here because of his style. So I'm going to go Woodley.
I see it, Zane. Your thought, your pick?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that Woodley's a head case, at least in some way. I mean, I don't want to say that like as an insult to the guy, but his 3 losses have all come.
Yeah, let's be clear about that. He's not a head case like Julie Brownie or whatever.
No.
He's a head case in that he's nearly a very, very, very excellent fighter, and it just might be that one ingredient that's keeping him away from the title shot.
His losses all tend to come in the similar sort of way, which is him just kind of offensively shutting down. And I mean, the Jake Shields one was bad. I mean,
when you've got 2 guys with no offense in the cage, you've got that fight.
That's the worst example, because there was a fighter who's not hurting him that he just had no interest in hurting either.
Maybe they just reached an accord. But Nate Marquardt, who's all offense and no defense, once he realized Woodley wasn't coming at him, he was just like, heavy bag time.
And then Rory McDonald, it looked like he didn't even show up to fight. I mean, quite honestly, he looked like he did not show up at all. And I mean, the thing I
wonder how much of that was the home field advantage McDonald had in Canada, because that was the fight card where McDonald was basically the headliner.
No, I mean, I think what it is that if people don't show Woodley respect or fear of his game, he doesn't know what to do. If he doesn't feel like he has the physical advantage in the cage, if he doesn't feel like he can be the bully and if he can dictate, I think he shuts down. I mean, I think that's a reasonable problem.
So what happens when Stun Gun Kim, who possibly, if he played his most disciplined game, could counter Woodley's game nicely?
Well, if Stun Gun
Kim wildly flailing, like what happens
if Stun Gun Kim comes in wildly flailing? There's a chance that Woodley just doesn't know what to do with it. I mean, that's the thing that I worry about. Is that if Kim comes out and just says, "Fuck it, I'm here to throw down," does Woodley just shell up and say, "I have no idea what to do with this"?
I think he does what he always does in the face of aggression. He'll change levels and try to hit a reactive takedown, and if he can't get it, he's in deep shit.
Yeah, and
How is Stun Gun's takedown defense? Because he's usually a very offensive wrestler. But
thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I was tempted to interrupt before. If you guys have SureDog up, can you look and see any takedown threats? I know, like Caro, but are there any wrestlers that Kim has faced in the past that also, presented the risk of putting him on his back?
Young Kim? Let's see.
I couldn't think of any.
I mean, Carlos Condit put him on his back, but that was with a flying knee.
No, Kim has never faced a serious power wrestler.
Like Hathaway was probably the best, right? And he's got that rugby-style wrestling.
What happened in the TJ Grant fight? Now, Grant can put people on their back.
Yeah.
That
was all the way back at UFC 100.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you what happened in that fight, but if my memory of Grant as a welterweight serves me, it was probably that he was kind of a sprawl and brawl guy that was undersized for the division, and Kim, being who he is, probably just took him down a lot and rode him like.
No. Grant was always a submission grappler, but he was not a strong wrestler. He was crafty as hell, You know, he would still
Yeah.
rush people with strikes and try to clinch and drag them down. But
I've-
still, is that right, though? Hathaway is really the biggest takedown threat that Kim has faced, and there was
Well,
not a lot of it.
Probably Eric Silva is the biggest takedown threat that Kim has faced. Eric Silva's actually got not like a great wrestling game, but he's got a really sick trip transition jiu-jitsu game.
That's legit. I put Hathaway on that level, too. Hathaway's pretty crafty.
Yeah, Hathaway just doesn't have the same like speed, raw speed and power that that Silva has to implement that game.
True. A lot of length there, though.
Woodley's a whole different kettle of fish, though, than any of these cats.
Woodley,
That's kind of interesting.
it is, but I'm still not sure. I'm not sure that Woodley will be able to just take Kim down easily. I don't know that his wrestling really works like that.
He's not a setup master either.
Yeah, he's not a setup master, and that would be. And Kim is big and is adept with his sprawl enough that I don't know that he'll just get taken down. I mean, I do remember Hathaway taking him down a couple times, so I think that Woodley certainly could if that's what he wants. I just don't. This is a tough fight to predict. I mean, I am 90% sure that Kim is going to do something wild and stupid and it's going to work. Like, that's how I feel about this.
See, my feeling about it is Kim's going to do something wild and stupid, and Woodley's just going to go, "Are you kidding me?" and crack him.
That's what I was going to say. It could go either way.
That would be my feeling after his fight with Josh Koscheck, but I don't know. I can't trust Woodley to do that. I mean, it's not like he was in any way a knockout artist before he fought Jay Huron in the UFC.
Just Galbao.
That was almost like Marquardt had a transitive property. Like the beating Marquardt put on him, like Woodley was like, "Oh, you can hurt people." Like,
Marquardt was huge in that fight. He was like a foot taller. He looked 3 weight classes bigger than Woodley in that fight.
Yeah, it was vicious. But I mean,
and then Shields immediately took that aura away, and then Koscheck. I mean, but how good is Koscheck right now? I mean, how
he's not Josh Koscheck anymore.
Yeah, and so him getting a quick knockout of Koscheck. I mean, I think Koscheck was pretty gun shy at that point. So if Kim isn't gun shy, and he's not gonna be, I think we can be pretty sure that Kim's gonna come out and just go for crazy shit, whatever he can. Then I don't think that Woodley is gonna outstrike him. And if Woodley's not gonna outstrike him, I don't know how this fight looks.
I see. So what are our picks? Dallas, who'd you pick?
I don't even know if I got a chance to talk on that one, but my quick thoughts on.
You started out. I think you picked Woodley.
Well, let me fucking summarize, damn it. I did. God, that seems like a long time ago. I do think that the big feel-out stage is going to be whether or not Woodley can just take him down right away. And then if he can, I actually do think Woodley's got quicker hands, straighter punches, and maybe more power.
Oh, yeah, he's a much better boxer and striker.
But he's really basic at the same time. And then if Kim does some crazy shit, if it's in the clinch, I think that favors him because he's much more tailored towards submission grappling than just trying to maintain position. So I'll stick with it. I think Woodley but I'm not confident in it.
I'm gonna take Kim. I'm feeling the stupid knockout that should not happen. That's really, I think Kim, that magic keeps going for Kim.
Attention gamblers, Zane Simon has a feeling. Again, second mortgage on the house. I think that's where we want to go with this. And the odds makers, they've got Woodley favored minus 160 all the way up to minus 185. Stun Gun Kim a bit of an underdog, plus 130 all the way, plus 125 all the way up to plus 150. So as I see. And now we've got Kung Lee and Michael Bisping in the hottest Seniors League division fight of the year. I would have to say Kung Lee is 42, and it looks like he's been buying some of those Randy Couture over-the-counter supplements, if you can still get those, because the natural is definitely what I'm thinking when I'm looking at Kung Lee these days.
Good.
Is that a lead-in?
Yeah, everybody's just doing a duck. I was just watching you guys
didn't mention
crawl.
a Wang, so I don't know if I'm supposed to talk.
I was just watching you guys crawl. The question is Michael Bisping going to come out of this fight blaming steroids for another knockout loss?
He
Probably.
could.
Who wants to talk about the fight first? And I have a rant about Kung Lee and Shan Shao because I felt burned because I loved Kung Lee. Still love him as a fighter. His style of crazy taekwondo kicks and wrestling, which is the most exciting combination, totally unique in MMA history. I think that a lot of fighters could potentially use that as a template if they had some submission grappling, which Kung Lee has never had, and be very exciting. So I thought naively that Shan Shao was just this huge pool of people with amazing crescent kicks and side kicks and totally badass hip tosses and judo tosses and Greco-Roman takedowns, and lo and behold, Kung Lee was a collegiate wrestler and Taekwondo champ who went into Shan Shao as a way of like, hey, this rule set is perfect for my skill set. I'm going to feast on these clowns, and I still have no real handle on what exactly Shan Shao's secret sauce is. So that's my tirade. Dallas, you can talk about Bisping first.
Not sure what to do with all that. It would be sensible for him, would it not, to go into a sport that caters to his two core competencies?
Well, sure. I'm just disappointed. I'm like, where's the Kung Lee factory? I would like him to be teaching guys to fight like that. Like, whatever it was that you did, make more of them.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. Let me start up because I think this might be controversial. I'm picking Kung Lee, and I think he's going to do very well. I was almost going to say beat Bisping's ass, but then I can just see a million tweets afterwards with calling me bad names. But I want to say, what are the betting odds? Because I want to say Bisping's a massive favorite, and I think Kung Lee is going to give it to him.
This Dallas is taking out a mortgage on his house because Bisping is favored anywhere from -280 on the low end all the way up to -340 on the high end.
Why?
Kung Lee +250 up to +263.
Why?
Kung Lee's old, and people have never trusted Kung Lee. I mean, there's just been this skepticism about Kung Lee, partly because of the hand-picked opponents, but I think also because of a naive doubt. People doubt his style.
What hand-picked opponents?
True.
Wand, Rich Franklin, those were like gimme.
Not in the UFC, but in the Strikeforce days. Kung Lee's reputation was not sullied by his UFC run.
Yeah, Scott Smith, Sammy Morgan, Tony Frickland.
Okay, the first couple, but he's only got 7 fights, so he had to start somewhere. And fighting Scott Smith and Frank Shamrock, those were two of the best guys in the division for all of Strikeforce. So.
Well, sure, but he was just clowning Smith and should have finished him the first time. He only got knocked out because he tires.
He fought the legit guys, the best guys in the division, and clowned him, and that sullies his.
I'm not the one who sullied him. I was on board with the Kung Lee hype train from day one.
That's what I'm trying to say.
His early career, he fought a bunch of striker guys who really were only focused on striking, or who had no takedown game to speak of, and he wrecked them. And I think while it's not unreasonable to still be hyped about Kung Lee, I certainly am. It's not also unreasonable to say, well, yeah, he fought really well. He wasn't fighting anybody who could actually challenge him.
Well, and I'm not trying to be a dick, but who were these fighters in his division that...
Oh, well, I don't... Dallas, you're talking about arguing with MMA fans over how legit somebody is. Like that is even a relevant
You're not making
argument.
that case.
Oh, I didn't know that was the context of the argument.
This is like Fox News. Some say.
Yeah.
And then we put something out there.
So,
we're not
I
saying
think the super legit point is that Kung Lee has been acting and he hasn't been consistently active in MMA. That, of course, is the biggest question mark and knock against him.
And he's 42.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
yep.
That's probably why he's still able to fight, though.
Yeah, that's
not in the gym all the time taking a beating. I mean,
I would tend to agree with that. Those are kind of hard, to measure. He hasn't how long has it been since he fought? Man,
a year, less, maybe.
I thought it was 2.
No, it has been 2 years. It has been 2 years. That's right, Rich Franklin, 2 years.
So, man, I for a while there, when everyone hated Bisping, I was kind of a proponent of his because the kid's got good skills. His wrestling, whether it's defensive or offensive, is phenomenal. And after the way he performed against Rashad and Matt Hamill up at 205, to have a 185er, he can do the shit that you saw him do against Chael Sonnen, which is super, super impressive. But, I mean, I think we kind of want to say we know his limits, but maybe I guess we do. He's a quick striker. There's not a lot of power on it unless he plants his feet, and he rarely does that. Because he's in the pocket and doing so much bobbing and weaving and trying to be more artistic rather than knock the guy's head off, it opens him up for counter strikes. Kung Lee is a fucking phenomenal counter striker. It goes way beyond his was it Taekwondo, his traditional martial arts striking
That's where he
background?
started, was Taekwondo. I mean, he was
Yeah.
a hardcore, and that's where all the shit, the spinning kicks, the crescent kicks, the emphasis on the side kick as a jab, that's all Taekwondo.
Yeah, but Homeboy can box too. I mean, he
Oh,
was
he can
boxing in the
definitely
pocket
box. He
with
can
Rich
definitely box,
Franklin.
and that is not Taekwondo.
Exactly, and on top of that, he is a talent. His footwork he's like a different iteration of Lyoto Machida, pretty much. Um, Obviously not the same, but a guy who has kind of like the mystical qualities. Spinning kicks, his footwork, he can toy with people, and when he does decide to come in and change levels or clinch up, he does it fluidly. So man, besides his age and all that, and we've seen he's got a ton of punching power. We should also add his cardio because the way he faded in a couple of those, in
He's
his
always
past.
faded, and some people argue that kicking style is just not a long-distance fighting style, that it's
Yeah.
inefficient and fundamentally unsound. That was Frank Shamrock's argument, but his
Fundamentally unsound. That's bullshit. I mean,
well, I'm
granted,
just saying between Muay Thai, what you would consider a conservative fighting striking style, or the Taekwondo style. I mean, the Muay Thai guys are always like, our style is more efficient. It's just physics. It's more efficient.
okay, from that standpoint, yeah. If you're towards the end of the fight and you're tired, throwing a roundhouse low kick or more traditional punches, yeah, it's going to take a shitload more exertion to spin, throw a spinning kick and all. But either way, the point stands. His cardio is a little bit in question. I wouldn't say Bisping is easy to finish, but he's finishable. So I guess the way I'm looking at it is, can Bisping avoid any major shots or knockdowns while dancing around and building up, a high accumulation of quick punches being landed? It's possible, yeah, but I'm leaning Kung Lee.
And Zane, your thoughts?
Those are my thoughts.
What a jaded cynic.
Well, I'm okay. First of all, Bisping isn't hard to finish. It is very hard to finish, rather. I mean, the only people who've knocked him out are Dan Henderson and Vitor Belfort, and I mean, there's no shame in either of that at all. But he looked terrible against Tim Kennedy. Bad, bad, bad. Some people are saying maybe it's his eye and that he's just not being able to see all that well anymore. That he can't, that's going. But really, it just looked like the momentum was drained out of him. Like that he had been fighting well at a high level for a long time based on his ability to stay active and stay in the gym and stay in fights. And then he suddenly had to take a bunch of time off to recover from an injury. A year off. Wasn't even that long. And he just looked slow. He looked old. He looked far less able to do any of the things he'd been able to do in the past. And part of that too is that Tim Kennedy is a legit top 5, top 10 middleweight right now. I mean, Tim Kennedy is
who's feeling his oats and is at a really good place in his career.
Yeah, Tim Kennedy is a legit top middleweight at this moment, and Bisping's not. Bisping's a guy who's probably at the border or outside the top 10 right now. But
Kung Lee hasn't seen the top 10.
But yeah, I mean Kung Lee is too. So to me, I mean that's kind of where my feeling of ugh comes in because Kung
don't
Lee.
you remember how much fun Matt Hughes and Renzo Gracie was?
Yes, exactly. Kung Lee's coming off a 2-year layoff. Bisping is coming off a fight where he looked.
And let's not forget, despite knocking out Rich Franklin, Kung Lee did not look like vintage Kung Lee in that fight. It looked like he had a leg injury and couldn't kick or something.
Well, he did have a knee injury. He was known to have a knee injury going in.
When did that fight end? First round, couple minutes in? He knocked him out, but he didn't look for.
It was 2 minutes into the first round.
I mean, it was just one of those fights. Just like when Rich Franklin knocked out Chuck Liddell. Chuck Liddell looked great right up until the point he got knocked out. I think Rich Franklin was looking like he was going to handily dominate that fight.
That fight didn't go long enough, or nothing happened in that fight to suggest either guy looked like.
Well, Franklin was much bigger.
Franklin was much bigger.
Footwork, and Kung Lee without kicks, just looked like he didn't know what to do.
Kung Lee with a 2-minute knockout looked pretty good in that fight.
I mean,
that would just be my odd conclusion.
Look, I'm a big Kung Lee mark, and I was shitting my pants. I was like, "Oh Jesus, Kung Lee, please, please!" And then he delivered, and it was because of my support.
Nothing happened in that fight to suggest anything. Except that Rich Franklin probably doesn't need to be fighting that much anymore. That was
Well,
like,
my suggestion was that Kung Lee might not need to be fighting too much more either.
yeah, but I wouldn't have taken that out of that fight. I mean, I would take that maybe out of the fact that Kung Lee's 42 and has had a career as a Sancho fighter and an MMA fighter at this point.
And Hollywood star.
Yeah, well, that's why he can pay all the bills and stay in the game.
Don't forget a series of gyms in the Northern California area.
But I just don't, like, I look at this fight and I can't see any way that I can pick who could win. Like, Bisping 2 years ago beats Kung Lee every day. He just boxes him from the outside, takes him down, roughs him up, boxes him from the outside.
You don't think the kicking range would disrupt Bisping's game, though?
What?
You don't
strongly disagree with that statement.
I mean, to me, it's like the question would be: Would Kung Lee's kicking game disrupt Bisping's boxing range so much that he would be flummoxed?
We're talking Kung Lee. We're talking the Kung Lee of the Patrick Cote era. Do you remember Kung Lee versus Patrick Cote?
Yeah.
That was not a pretty fight.
I'm saying his knockout win over Rich Franklin wasn't a pretty fight. Like,
the knockout.
He hasn't had a pretty fight in a long time.
Fight. It was not even
what you guys
really
are talking
a fight.
about. I don't understand anything that's happening right now.
We're saying Kung Lee's old, Dallas, and the signs of winter on the leaves have been apparent for a while.
I'm saying that a couple of years ago, Michael Bisping was a much better fighter than I trust him to be right now. That's what I'm saying.
I would agree with. Not that he would easily beat Kung Lee. Bisping beats everybody by using footwork and angles above a level that most have. Kung Lee has above a level that Bisping has and all that. And
maybe I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, I like Kung Lee a lot, but I don't actually think that he was like. I don't ever think that Kung Lee was one of the premier strikers in MMA.
Well, he hasn't fought long enough too.
Or yeah, I mean, so that's my you can't like. There's no fight I could point to from Kung Lee where I would say, yes, Kung Lee is one of the best fighters in MMA based off this fight.
Well, he's never moved up to that level of competition.
Yeah, so then.
But his footwork, I think that is an interesting question because he threw off some pretty good strikers with his footwork and his unusual kicking game and his range. So I'm just very curious to see him against somebody who's, I think, one of the better technical strikers he's ever faced in Michael Bisping, if Bisping is what Bisping used to be.
And I don't trust that. I don't know.
Let's say it was a video game and you had perfect peak Kung Lee, say 27-year-old Kung Lee against 27-year-old Michael Bisping.
I would pick Bisping.
And Dallas, who would you pick in fantasy video game land?
I'm fucking picking 42-year-old Kung Lee.
So you would pick them both at their peak.
His footwork is out of this world, and on top of that, Bisping has to be in the pocket to throw very non-threatening punches, where Kung Lee will cover a shitload of range, a lot of motion, a lot more angles, and use kicks and punches. And will change levels for a takedown, regardless of if it's
get a takedown and not change levels. That's where I think he's most devastating, is you'll be thinking you're clinching up with him, and next thing you know, you're flying through the air off of his hip.
Of course, Bisping's takedown defense is, I used to say long or underrated. Now people are starting to catch wind of it. I think he might be able. It would be smart from a point standpoint to change, even if Bisping gets right back up. But that's one little notch for Kung Lee.
But do you think Kung Lee can throw him?
Bisping was a huge middleweight.
Yeah, that's the thing, because Kung Lee honestly should be fighting at welterweight. He's not. He's a tiny middleweight.
I guess specifically throw him, I don't know. Probably not. No, because the way I see it is he should shoot a takedown just because it will dilute Bisping's striking a little bit, or keep him, oh shit, this guy might change levels too. I guess I'm saying is offensively he's much more well-rounded, both specifically in striking, his footwork, the movement, all the angles he covers, and he goes for offensive wrestling more, clinch or shooting from outside.
Actually, Bisping's always been a pretty good offensive wrestler. That was
I think
he just doesn't use it. He just doesn't use it.
Yeah, he's had some great performances using this wrestling. I think if Kung Lee were to go in with a double leg, that would be a big mistake. That would be playing right into Bisping's hands. But time is up. We need to wrap this up. So we've got to pick. Dallas is picking Kung Lee.
I'm picking. I don't know.
Better pick Bisping
Dallas
now.
is going. I mean, Zane is going to be picking to sleep in. I believe is the pick.
I'm picking Bisping because I think that his Kennedy fight was a bad showing against a top middleweight off a layoff, and I expect him to look a little bit more like his old self. And I don't know what to expect out of Kung Lee at this point. I wouldn't be surprised if Kung Lee came in like Randy Couture against Lyoto Machida and suddenly looked 10 years older.
It's quite possible, but it's possible he comes in looking like Randy Couture versus Tim Sylvia too. So
why would Kung Lee shooting a double leg play right into Bisping's hands
that's
again?
the kind of takedown game Bisping likes to play. He's had some real good success beating Kang. Remember the Dennis Kang fight? That was a fight where the grappling was sweet and the takedowns were conventional, and Bisping won that battle. And I think that if you're into, remember how well he did against Chael Sonnen? I mean, I thought he won that fight. The judges disagreed, but I think that
yeah, he's got good takedown defense, but I don't see how Kung Lee's shooting a double leg, whether it works or not. I said it's just going to keep Bisping guessing.
It's a tactic.
Well, it tires out a fighter with an already questionable gas tank.
Yeah, and Bisping knows how to shut down better. I mean, but see, I think Kung Lee's striking game is so unconventional and so fucked up anyway, he doesn't need to gild the lily with, make him worry about takedowns. I mean, make him worry about a hip toss, make him worry about a seonagi. I mean,
that's all the same thing. I'm saying he should also threaten with the grappling aspect of things, whether it's a takedown or whatever, in addition to
I was strictly saying that don't go for the conventional double or single leg takedown, is all I was saying. Of course, he's always a takedown threat.
I would still do it, though.
What kind of hat is Chewy wearing, anyway? Chewy needs a new hat.
All right, I'll spruce him up next time, you're right.
He needs like a mini pearl flowered hat with the price tag on it and everything.
I have just the item for you, Nate. I'll take care of that.
So, that's it for our... Oh, and the odds. I already gave the odds on this. So we're done, right? We've done everything. We've met our due diligence. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We will be back. Connor and Dallas and I will be back for the Vivisection on UFC Fight Night Tulsa. Bendo versus RDA. That's Benson Henderson versus Rafael dos Anjos. That'll be tomorrow, correct, Dallas? And then, Zane, will you be joining me for the 6th round to look back at both of these fights?
I'll be around for that.
So we'll be back for Saturday's 6th round immediately after the second fight card. May or may not have a bathrobe review, depending on whether I have anything to say. Eugene will be back with Knuckle Up, and then we'll be back into the cycle of UFC 177 previews all next week for this UFC 177, man. Yeah, the kids are talking about that one. So TJ Dillashaw rematching Hanan Barao in a fight, because there were so many questions the first time, like how low can their pay-per-view buy rates go? Anyway, that's it. Follow us on Twitter at Uncle Justice is Dallas Winston, at The Zane Simon is The Zane Simon, at Kid Nate is moi. Subscribe to us on YouTube, MMANation.com. That's MMANation.com. Give us the thumbs up. Hey, don't give me the wrap it up. This is all essential information, Dallas, and this is the reason you've been demoted from MC, because you come in at 2 hours long and you don't do the plugs. So read us on BloodyElbow.com and Adios MMA Aficionados. And really, I'm just teasing.
I did the plugs after the 2-hour show.
I would hope in the 2-hour show you could work in the plugs. That's, seriously. Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. Adios, MMA aficionados.